You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 15th of October. BBC sex abuse scandal spreads with yet more accusations. Somewhere in the UK a bell has dropped its clangers in St Paul. Christians flee Bosnia amid discrimination and Islamisation. Huge waves of immigrants push the boundaries in Dortmund, Germany. Switzerland prepares for a massive civil unrest in Central Europe. 14-year-old Indonesian child expelled after she is raped. Coptic Christians suffer daily under fundamentalist Islam in Egypt. Thought for the day, the British sense of humour. And finally, 1 leg, 2 leg, 3 leg, 4. UK news. Now Dave Lee Travis has fallen victim to the selective memories, or rather mammaries, of former female employees. One woman, unnamed, who was just 17 at the time, got groped in the BBC studios by Travis. Another, Vivian Grigor, has claimed that Travis jiggled her breasts in the 1980s. The line for the Savile abusers is growing longer by the minute, and will do so now, especially as the great god Mammon has raised his head. That is legalese for possible money for gropes and trauma to us ungroped. The World at 8 writer comments, "I do not feel sorry at all for most of these people. Anyone from the audience in Top of the Pops to young performers and young employees knew what they were about. The 80s were worse than the 60s, and it was known at that time about the reputations of most of the disc jockeys and performers at the BBC and ITV, and indeed in show business in those days in general. Getting groped is hardly on the same line as Muslim sexual grooming or girl trafficking, is it? Where do you think the casting couch went to? The latest media fad, of course, television. The theatre and cinema has had it for years. The ones I do feel very sorry for are the youngsters in hospitals, because if it is proved they were a captive audience and the true victims in all this, and probably the most silent, especially if they died some years ago. Anti-capitalist demonstrators, pro-Pussy Riot imitators, or simply clangers, interrupted evensong at St Paul's Cathedral and demanded they take communion whilst chained to the pulpit. They also failed in their attempt to be arrested, like their predecessors in Russia. One of the women who chained herself to the pulpit at St Paul's was an actress, Alison Playford, 33, from Ealing, who once starred as a prostitute in an Emma Thompson film. Her co-clangers were Tammy Samadi, 30, and Siobhan Grimes, 25, who works for the Homeless Action. Since the previous sit-down protest by Occupy morons, who were allowed to camp outside for months and were even reported for defecating in the grounds, they now see the cathedral as an easy target. Occupy claim that the church had accepted funds from Goldman Sachs and claim that the church will not die even if St Paul's is closed. A World at 8 reporter commented, "Well, since Occupy is a Marxist, atheist, nihilist creation, that would please them all immensely, especially if it was turned into a mosque, or perhaps not. By the way, the term clangers is this presenter's. It comes from an old family saying that somewhere a village bell has dropped a clanger, which means an ugly child. Very un-PC." European news. Masses of Christians are leaving post-war Bosnia-Herzegovina amidst mounting discrimination and forced Islamisation, according to a new report released Friday, October the 12th. Many believers have left the country since war raged 20 years ago, said Netherlands-based advocacy and aid group Kerk in Nood, or Church in Need, in the report obtained by Bos News Life in Sarajevo. There are just 440,000 Catholics left in the Balkan nation, half the pre-war figure, the group said. The report came on the heels of talks between the Cardinal of Sarajevo, Vinko Puljic, and European Council President Herman Van Rompuy about difficulties faced by Bosnia's Christians. Puljic reportedly complained that while dozens of mosques were built in the Bosnian capital Sarajevo, no building permissions were given for Christian churches. The Cardinal has already waited 13 years for permission to build just a small church, Church in Need said. Authorities so far refuse to return hundreds of nationalised church buildings, despite a ruling by the European Court of Human Rights to do so, according to Christian officials. Additionally, the Church in Need said tens of thousands of people, many of them Catholic Croats, have been prevented from returning home following the war. These obstacles violate the Dayton Peace Accords that ended the 1992-1995 Bosnian War, which split the nation between a Serb Republic and a Muslim Croat Federation. Time is running out as there is a worrisome rise in radicalism, Pulchik said, who added that the people of Bosnia-Herzegovina were persecuted for centuries after European powers failed to support them in their struggle against the Ottoman Empire. A World Date spokesman said, "Where is the useless united morons when needed? When it was the Muslims supposedly being persecuted for no reason 20 years ago, the world practically moved into the area, but obviously they will not do the same for Christians. Disgusting." From Dortmund, Germany. The situation at the processing point for immigrants in Dortmund-Hachenaf has sharpened. The shelter is full, as is the second one belonging to this complex in Dern. It is an unbearable situation for asylum seekers and residents as well. The immigrants will be located temporarily in sport halls. 350 came in just one night. Yesterday a ban on receiving more immigrants was declared. In the worst times the shelter was hopelessly full, with some 880 people. 2 cases of chickenpox made the crisis management harder. There is a high risk of infection. The crowd of immigrants was accommodated yesterday in sports halls. The number of immigrants doubles daily. The wave of refugees, which has been increasing since August, has formally overrun the city in the last days. And it is not only Dortmund which is affected. All centres of reception are in the same situation. The healthy ones are given the vaccine and if possible transferred today to other compounds in the outskirts of Dortmund. It has been promised that capacities will be made available, and together with this a third reception centre will be set up in North Rhine-Westphalia. The emergency measures of the camp beds has been approved only for 24 hours. After this, proper settlements must be created, so the responsibility for this lies with the government. A World Day spokesman said, "Anyone who has read The Camp of Saints will know exactly what is going on. One day or week or month the whole tidal wave of these people will march further into Europe. These are just the precursors. The battle lines are being drawn between those that accept this and those who will not." Despite being one of the most stable and economically vibrant countries in the world, primarily as a result of its refusal to join the euro, Switzerland is preparing for mass civil unrest in Central Europe that could spill over its border, by mobilising troops to deal with potential disorder. The Swiss military is adding 4 new military battalions to its army that will spread around the country for the purposes of dealing with the fallout from any widespread disorder that could arise from the crumbling eurozone. Minister Murier is concerned that the massive decline in European militaries since the end of the Cold War could leave countries vulnerable to insurrections and even race wars. John R. Schindler, a professor of national security affairs at the US Naval War College, notes that if the ire of Muslims is raised a couple of notches above the anger that was stirred as a result of the YouTube film which insulted the Prophet Muhammad, immigrants in European countries could rise up. It is commonly held by European security insiders that if the next Anders Breivik were to target Muslims, not fellow Europeans, things could get unimaginably ugly very quickly, he writes. It is difficult to see how Europe's much smaller militaries could cope with massive civil disturbances. And don't ask Uncle Sam for help, since the very last thing Obama and the Pentagon wants is to get dragged into any riot suppression, particularly putting down Muslim uprisings anywhere in Europe. Switzerland maintains a trained army of 200,000 troops, a massive amount considering the nation's tiny population. All military-age males are also mandated to complete basic training, meaning the country can rely on a huge militia in times of crisis. A fact many historians cite when explaining why Hitler refused to invade Switzerland during World War II, even though it was surrounded by Nazi-occupied bordering countries. Police have found bomb-making materials in a car park near Paris as part of an investigation into an extremely dangerous terrorist cell linked to an attack on a kosher grocery. Paris prosecutor François Molin said the discovery in Torcy, east of the capital, led authorities to invoke a rarely used legal clause to allow them to extend questioning of 12 suspects by a day, and possibly 2. The country has been on high alert for possible terror attacks by radical Islamists after a man who claimed links to Al-Qaeda shot and killed 3 Jewish children, a rabbi and 3 paratroopers in southern France in March. On Saturday, police found weapons, cash and a list of Paris area Israeli associations after the raids conducted in eastern Strasbourg near the Riviera resort of Cannes. In Strasbourg, police shot dead Jeremy Louis Sidney, whom they suspect to be the cell's leader, after he opened fire at them with a revolver. The suspects in custody are French and recent converts to Islam. 4 of them had written wills. 1 was carrying a loaded gun. A well-to-date reporter commented, "I was reading a French paper this morning and the editorial headline was, 'The enemy within.' This is unprecedented in France as it clearly pointed the finger at Muslims. Normally this would be seen as racist." World news. An Indonesian school has expelled a 14-year-old girl claiming she tarnished the institution's image after she was raped by a trafficking syndicate, a child's rights activist said on Tuesday. Arist Merdeka Surat, chairman of the National Commission for Child Protection, said a private school just outside Jakarta expelled the teenager during a ceremony attended by pupils on Monday. A teacher told the girl she had tarnished the school's image, said Surat. The school has worsened her trauma by humiliating her in front of hundreds of schoolmates, he said. The Commission has sent a letter of protest to the school's management and will also write to the Education Ministry, asking them to review its licence. The girl was the victim of child trafficking. The school should have helped her cope with her trauma, he said. Surat said that the teenage girl was contacted through Facebook by a member of a trafficking syndicate that imprisoned her for a week last month. The school failed to ensure a child's rights for access to education, he said. The school could not be reached for comment. Coptic Christians have lived in Egypt since Christianity began. Once they were the majority population, until Islam set about its crusade to convert all of northern Africa by the sword. Now they number only 10% of Egypt's population, because most people have been forcefully converted to Islam, either through terrorism or by economic means, such as high taxation. Now that Egypt has a radical Islamic government, the Copts are suffering unbelievable cruelty, arrested even for praying in their own homes. Their daughters are being kidnapped and forced to convert to Islam by torture and rape. A world-to-date commentator said, "Where are the UN? Where are the rest of the Christian world? Where are all the human rights lawyers? Where are the expressions of horror from the media? Where is Mad Rowan or the Pope? Nowhere. They are all bloody hypocrites and liars. Why the silence? Egyptian Christians are being cleansed from their native land. If they were Muslims, the world would be in an uproar. Well, this presenter states that the day the Muslims try to take over my country is the day I enlist the help of every pig farmer left and run huge herds of lovely fat piggies all over everything, so the average nutty Muslim cannot live or have a building there, and I hope there'll be many more like-minded people with me. Viva le piggies." Actually, it's Viva le cochon. Thought for the day. The British sense of humour. Now, this is a social statement about Europe, and the Europeans do not have our sense of humour, although I believe our humour might be the downfall of us in the end, because we laugh at certain things which are life-changing in order to avoid thinking about them. And I quote, "Europe has been rocked with riots and unrest over the last 3 years, tensions that have only increased in recent months. France, Britain, Italy, Greece, Portugal and most recently Spain have all witnessed scenes of unprecedented disorder. A growing underclass as the gap between rich and poor widens, allied with harsh austerity measures which punish those least responsible, yet most vulnerable to the economic collapse, have fanned the flames of discontent. In Spain, which was devastated by huge riots last month, youth unemployment has risen to exceed 50%, whilst benefits have been slashed. Overall unemployment stands at a staggering 25.1%. But now our British sense of humour. I love it, as it encompasses an easy-going attitude, plus the old saying that when an Englishman gets angry, he writes a letter. But here are a few points at which humour alone cannot mend. The British sense of humour and fair play would seem to accommodate the following. Massive immigration, especially from the Muslim Third World. We must love them, because we do not stop them or discourage them in our towns and villages. We pay them benefits and also seem to enjoy their protest marches, which occur on a regular basis and in which we as a people are either vilified or ignored. Our policeman plods also seem to laugh when faced with not arresting them and just wave them on their happy way. Foreign viruses on the increase, like the latest laugh, which is Crimean Congo viral hemorrhagic fever, which apparently proved no laughing matter for an unnamed garage owner from Glasgow who went to his brother's wedding in Afghanistan and returned with this lovely disease and died at the Royal London Free Hospital. Well, it would be free, wouldn't it? Yet another laugh on the laughter scale. Obviously, although from Glasgow, we do know that most of the people they do not name or say are British are in fact not ethnically or even remotely English. This, I feel, is one of them. Start laughing now. We have leprosy back, we have smallpox, we have TB, and because we have built a channel tunnel courtesy of the French and are expanding our air terminals, we will have a lot more unchecked diseases, many of which are not a laughing matter in this already overcrowded country. The sad fact is that many of these diseases are highly contagious. The laughing factor is that HIV, also on the increase from filthy African migrants, and Ebola are only contactable from bodily fluids and direct contact. So whether you're laughing or not, do not sleep with these people, because you will indirectly kill your nearest and dearest and, of course, your laughing good self. And of course we're allowing our schools to become overpopulated with children, either of these migrants or descended from them, or indeed intermarriage. Most of these families travel back and forth, thoroughly enjoying the freedom of benefits from us in the UK and taking the money back to their homeland and relatives. And yes, another laugh, they have tribe upon tribe of relatives. And yet another giggle, some of these relatives could be disease-ridden and could also be brought into the UK. Do I hear laughter again? This could be a gurgle from bloody lungs because of course Ebola is the bleeding disease non-stop. Now in the case of these many strains of very nasty illnesses that are passed from animal source to humans, though sometimes eating the bushmeat, which is often monkeys or apes which come into contact with bat droppings. Have another laugh because bushmeat is smuggled into the UK on a regular basis to accommodate our African migrants. It is not a question of if, but when. Media which hushes up sexual underage rape and grooming because of the Muslim factor, but bangs on and on about a dead old white guy who gropes and bangs young available white girls. Comedians who are seen banging away obviously in consensual couplings, a few gropings of women who are well past it now, there the old British sense of humour again. I thought when you got older your memory got worse, it probably does apart from the money angle, and a couple of young boys who got groped. Notwithstanding their undoubted trauma, I remember when the British sense of humour accommodated men who leered, groped, made suggestive suggestions, rather like pass the suggestive digestives love, and openly whistled or asked you out. That was a rite of passage for many a young girl like me, and I worked in London in professional firms, so it was all done with good accents and in the best possible taste. But it happened, and I wish it was like that now. I do not like the anti-male, none-whistling, none-appreciative society. Poor old fellows. My youngest son, unattached, said he went to smile at an attractive girl the other day and she looked at him like a bulldog who'd swallowed a wasp. And he is good looking. Where's the great British charm, let alone the humour? Another great laugh, but not for us Brits, is that the term British is used without fail for practically everyone who is non-ethnically British but should, I believe, possess a British passport and not be an illegal immigrant. Now, even my sense of humour fails me here. We are not in America. We did not make the call to Europe, or indeed the sodding world, to bring us their needy or displaced personages. You can have an African American, although I think it is stupid, although there is only, in the right sense of the word, one true American, and that is a Native American who can claim roaming those lands long before the European influx. And I mean European, not African or Pakistani or whatever. So in truth, what should our colonisers be called? The whole Asian community thing is a myth. Muslims refer to themselves as Muslims, which is a religion, not an ethnic class. So we could have British Pakistani Muslims who in fact only think of themselves as Muslims. We could have British West Indian Christians of African heritage. There now, that's a laugh, isn't it? We could even go the whole diversity hog and make me British, Austro-Hungarian, Irish, German, Italian, Spanish, possibly Arab from pre-Islamic history, white, could be a bit of Jewish blood, English, oh and I forgot the bit about Caribbean and Scottish blood too. There, now I fit in with all the other Brits around, don't I? You need a huge sense of humour to be young and English in this property-ridden hell of today. Youngsters are moving back with ma and pa because they simply cannot either earn enough to make the deposits required by the mortgage lenders or simply cannot get a mortgage. Why? When we give certain people money to live in affordable housing or council houses, sometimes extremely upmarket ones, and the Muslims especially can always get money for houses from Sharia mortgages, whilst our poor non-Muslim families or couples cannot get a look in. Laughing aside, If Sharia mortgages were not available in the UK, we would not lose whole towns to the colonisers because they would not have the money. And our mortgage lenders would be forced to make adjustments so that low capital mortgages were available again, and I do not mean nil down subprime ones. Do you want to know why Sharia mortgages are so available? If you are a Muslim, you may take out a Sharia mortgage. This means that due to certain rulings of Islam, these mortgages are not classed as mortgages but as rent to another Muslim. Which means in the UK, if a person who holds a Sharia mortgage to his brother or relative is out of work or unable to make payment, he can and does call on his local authority to pay, and they do. Have a long laugh. Many millions of pounds come out of local councils to pay these rents, which are in fact mortgages, and in some cases the councils concerned have paid out for the entire house. This is why Sharia law is not a joke. Behind it is serious money. Yours. Last laugh. Halal. Do not get me on halal. I said many years ago that the Navy were eating halal meat, and I was vilified in the press for saying so, when in fact it was true. The Navy were the first of our armed forces to adopt halal meat, mainly because one of the bugaboos was in fact a Muslim. Not laughing now, my sense of humour is gone, but I will try to get over it and have a giggle. Now at least we know why we have to get the British sense of humour up and running again. Now we know the problems, we can try and do something about them. But truthfully, your laughter is the best medicine provided it doesn't kill you. Remember the laughing policeman? Have you noticed Muslims really laugh? Perhaps it's genetic, or perhaps they're busy thinking nasty thoughts. Not us, my fellow Brits. We are thinking lovely thoughts, aren't we? And finally, South Korean sentenced in octopus death scheme. A report says a South Korean man who blamed a live octopus for the death of his girlfriend has been sentenced to life in prison for killing her. Yonhap news agency says police had initially concluded in 2010 that the man's girlfriend suffocated while swallowing an entire octopus that stuck in her throat. It says prosecutors reopened the case 5 months later after her family found out the man had received $180,000 in insurance money for her death. Yonhap says a court in the city of Incheon convicted the 31-year-old man on Thursday of smothering the woman to death. Live octopuses are a delicacy in South Korea and are usually eaten after being cut into pieces alive. The World Day spokesperson commented, disgusting. Where are the octopi's rights? Poor little things. What goes around comes around. Go tell someone who cares. This presenter is on the side of the octopus. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynne Mozart, and I wish you all a very good night.